Hi, everybody. It's Eric Murray from the sugarhuddle.com. As you know, every single week on the sugarhuddle.com, I do my NFL betting lines and picks where I pick each game. And of course, I do half point lines. So I add a half point for the full point lines just so that there's no pushes. Last week when I did my week 5 games, I told you that I was a game below 500 at 7 and 8 and that it would pick up. And I've had better weeks and I had a winning record even after last week going a game under 500. Well, unfortunately, I had my worst week yet in week 5. I ended up going 5 and 10. In particular, the Sunday early games really screwed me because I was looking when I was trying to write my Sunday early game recap, and I was going down the line in order every single game, and all of a sudden I was like, okay, loss, 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 loss. So the first 6 games in order were all losses. I had won the Thursday night game with the Patriots. Then the next 6 games in a row were losses. I won the last 2 Sunday early games as far as how they were listed in order, which of course were the Bengals game when they came back and beat the Dolphins, and the Lions being able to beat the Packers because of 20,000 missed field goals from Mason Crosby. And then I think I end up splitting I split the late games. So that was 2 and 2 right there, and then I lost Sunday night game, and I won the Monday night. Well, no, actually, I lost the Monday night game, I think. Yeah, I lost the Monday night game. So I must have won. I don't know, but anyway, somehow I ended up. I somehow ended. Oh yeah, because I won the Thursday night game. So I won the Thursday night game with the Patriots. Then I won the two of those early games, and that's all I won with the Bengals and the Lions. And then I won 2 of the 4 late games. And I can't remember offhand who I won with, but I think the Seahawks were one of the ones I won with. I can't remember who else, but anyways, I did horrible. I was 5 and 10. That's all it needs to be said. Awful. So hopefully this week I'll get back on the winning track. You never know. So take my picks with a grain of salt if you want, but we'll see. But anyways, I want to go down the line like I did last week and give you all the games and what my picks were, and then I'll go back and break them down for you. So the Thursday night game this week, Eagles -2.5. They're at the Giants, so they're on the road, but they're the favorites. I've got the Eagles winning that game. And in the Sunday early games, there's 9 early games and 3 late games this week. The Bucks are at the Falcons. The Falcons -3.5. I actually have the Bucks. I think the Falcons will win, but the Bucks will get within a field goal. Steelers are at the Bengals. Bengals 3.5. That's an adjusted line. The original line was Bengals -3. I actually have the Steelers covering and winning the game. The Chargers -1.5 on the road at the Browns. This is a really tricky one. That's an adjusted line. The Chargers were actually 1-point favorite. I had a half point. Either way, I got the Chargers winning that game. Then the Bears, another road team that are favored. There's a ton of road teams that are favored this week. I mean, relatively speaking. The Bears, the adjusted line, my adjusted line, -2.5 at the Dolphins. I have the Bears. The Seahawks, which is actually not, they're technically designated as a road team, but it's actually in London. Game overseas in London. It's the Seahawks and the Raiders. Seahawks, the adjusted line, -2.5. I've got the Seahawks covering and beating Oakland. The Cardinals, they're at Minnesota. This is the biggest line of the weekend. The Vikings are a 9.5-point favorite. We all saw what happened last time when they were a big favorite at home when they played the Bills and they got clobbered. That's not going to happen, but Arizona's going to be able to cover, is what I think. Colts are at the Jets. Jets favorite, a 2.5-point favorite at home again for the second straight week, and they were able to get it done against the Broncos. I say they get it done against the Colts as well, and the Jets cover. The Panthers at the Redskins. Redskins got clobbered on Monday Night Football, but I think they bounced back, and I think they cover. They're a 2.5-point favorite, and that's, again, an adjusted line because they were just a 2-point favorite before I had a half point. Anyways, but I got the Redskins either way winning the game and covering. The Bills are at the Texans. Texans, this is pretty surprising. They're an 8.5-point favorite. Bills aren't that great, but still, Texans aren't all that either. So that's a big line there. Could be a Texans blowout. I do expect the Texans to win the game, but I actually have the Bills covering. I think they'll do what they did in Minnesota in the sense that they're not going to get killed. Now, they won that game 27-6. They're not going to beat Houston like that, I don't think, but nonetheless, they'll cover, whatever. What the hell do I know? Anyways, the Sunday late games, like I said, there's only 3 of them this week. The Rams on the road are a 6.5-point favorite at Denver, so basically a touchdown favorite. Regardless, I have the Rams covering. Jacksonville, my adjusted line, -2.5 at Dallas. 2.5 doesn't matter. I have Jacksonville covering and winning that game. And then the final Sunday late game is the Ravens. This is another line where they were a 2-point favorite, and I added a half point. So now Baltimore 2.5-point favorite at Tennessee, yet another road favorite, and I have Baltimore covering that. So I have a lot of road teams winning this week. And then Sunday Night Football, that trend continues. The Chiefs are at New England. Patriots minus 3.5, but I have the road team, the Chiefs, covering that and winning the game for that matter. And even if they lose by field goal, I'd still win on that. But I think the Chiefs are going to win the game, and I'll get to that more in a second. And then the Monday night game, this might be, well, I said this about the Niners a couple weeks ago. This might be the biggest gimme game because the 49ers at the Packers. Packers 7.5-point favorite, and I have the Packers covering. Monday night in Lambeau, that's going to be tough. But anyways, so those are all the games. I've got a whole bunch of road teams. I got, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Yeah, 12 of the 15 games I'm picking this week, I'm going with the road team. And of those, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 7 of those 12 are favorites. So there's a lot of road teams that are favored this week, a lot of favorable matchups for these road teams. Very, very interesting. Starting with the Thursday night game with the Eagles at the Giants. Again, they're 2.5-point favorite. Neither team is playing particularly well right now, as we know. The Eagles, defending world champs, are just 2-3, lost for the second week in a row. And I thought they played a lot better at Tennessee a couple weeks ago. And this past Sunday, they were at home against the Vikings, and they didn't look very good at all. They were able to rally late, and they lost by a couple points, but the Vikings did what they needed to do. They were able to build a lead. I think they were up by, I think it was 20-3 at one point. But you know what? The secondary had a lot of troubles against Kirk Cousins. Cousins 30-37, 301 yards and a touchdown. And then, of course, Jay Ajayi, who had that big lost fumble in the red zone, he ended up tearing his ACL, which is a huge setback for the Eagles, and he complained about the play calling and how they weren't running it enough. They only ran it 17 times. They did get 81 yards, which is almost 5 yards a carry, but I do agree with them. They need to run it some more, and that would help out Carson Wentz. As far as receivers go, other than Zach Ertz, who had 10 catches for, I think it was 110 yards, he wasn't really targeting hardly anybody else, so he's become pretty reliant on Ertz. But then again, the Giants, they don't have the greatest defense in the world, not the greatest pass defense in the world. And there's a real rift there with the whole Odell Beckham Jr. situation. I got to be honest, I think Odell's a heck of a player, but I think he's a hothead and he's not worth the money for all the problems he brings. But at the same time, in this situation, I really don't think he did much wrong, to be completely honest with you. I thought he was pretty respectful with how he expressed himself. I still don't understand why Lil Wayne was sitting there in that ESPN conversation. That was pretty odd and pretty random, but whatever. Maybe it's because he's from Louisiana and they're both from Louisiana. They're homies. I don't know. But anyways, so I still think, though, that could be a little bit of a rift there. Eli Manning just looks decrepit. Yeah, he led that touchdown drive that put him ahead by 1 before the Panthers had that amazing walk-off kick. But, he had 2 just really ridiculous interceptions. Of course, one of the touchdown passes was Beckham throwing it to Barkley. So I just think the Giants, you know what, they set a franchise record, 13 losses last year. I said before the season that, look, Pat Shurmur is not a very good coach. Even though I'm not a Browns fan, because I'm from Northeast Ohio, I saw him coach a lot for the Browns. And, I know he won 8 or 9 games in 2 years, which seems like a lot compared to what Hugh Jackson has done. But honestly, Pat Shurmur was just a terrible head coach, and I didn't think it was going to work out the Giants. I still don't think it's going to work out long-term, even if they do draft a quarterback. I just don't think he's head coach material, and already he's getting testy just like he did with the Cleveland media. So, good luck with that in New York. Anyways, and then, like I said, Sunday early games, you got Tampa at Atlanta. Atlanta, I do think, will win it, but again, 3.5-point favorite, so I think Tampa will find a way to maybe lose by like a down-to-the-wire field goal. The Bucs are interesting because a lot of people didn't think much of them coming into the season. I picked them to go 2-14, and of course they start 2-0. Fitzpatrick, great start. Then they lose on Monday Night Football. They almost come back in that game, bunch of turnovers, bunch of mistakes, and then they get killed against the Bears. And that was, just a terrible game for them. And I just look at it and say, you know what, their secondary is horrible. Matt Ryan should be able to, eat them up, so to speak. I know he was good, but not great in Pittsburgh. And I was shocked that the Steelers beat him like that 41-17. But I think nonetheless, Matt Ryan will play really, really well. But the one thing why I decided to go with the Bucks on this one is because Atlanta themselves obviously have a terrible defense. But the other thing is, Jameis Winston, this will be his first official start since his return from suspension. I'm really interested to see what he does in this, and I wouldn't be shocked if he actually plays really, really well. Not really a big believer that he's gonna have his best year yet or anything like that. And I think Tampa eventually will have to move on from him. But I could see him playing exceptionally well in this game. So it should be very, very interesting. But I think that's going to be a down the wire game. And then the Steelers at the Bengals. Bengals are favored, but let's face it. I mean, Andy Dalton, I'd have to go back and look, but his all-time record against the Steelers is horrible. Marvin Lewis has been around a lot longer than Dalton, of course. His record is even worse against the Steelers. I've been a big believer in the Bengals all year long, big supporter in the Bengals. They're 4-1 leading the division, but I just don't feel great about this game. Of course, they've had to rally back a few times. They're the cardiac Bengals, if you will. Week one rallying in Indianapolis, and a couple weeks ago they had to rally in Atlanta, and then this past weekend they were down 17-0 at home and against the Dolphins, who are fading, and they came back and won that game 27-17. But I don't think the Steelers are going to make some of those same mistakes that Atlanta and Miami made, or even Indy week one. And so I think the Steelers are going to win the football game. Ben isn't making as many turnovers, isn't committing as many turnovers as he was. Antonio Brown's really starting to come on. I don't know if James Conner, who had a great game Sunday, if he's going to be able to replicate that against the Bengals and their defensive line. They'll definitely get after it, and Ben will definitely get pressured. But I'm not sure. I have a feeling that even with the Steelers' defense, this could be a game where Dalton maybe makes 2 or 3 questionable throws, to say the least, and turns it over a couple times. And then, of course, that really opens up the door for the Steelers to really run away with it. So I actually like the Steelers. I just think, I know as much as you don't want to go too much with history, you want to live in the present. I just think that's a pick where you're like, okay, well, history says this, so I'm going to go with that, and that's why I went with the Steelers there. And the Chargers at the Browns, like I said, this is a really tough pick. I was shocked that the Browns beat the Ravens. It was a defensive struggle. The Browns ended up winning in overtime 12-9. But I was surprised. I thought the Ravens would beat up on them, and I got to give the Browns a lot of credit. They did a great job. Last 2 years they played the Chargers, and they've played them really tough. Remember, the Browns before the season, their last win was back in December of 2016, Christmas Eve, and they beat the Chargers in that game. And then last year they lost 19-10 in LA, but it was a very competitive game throughout. But I just think that, Phillip Rivers, he's looked good all year long. The Chargers offense, they don't stop for anybody. They're going to put up points. We just saw the Browns 2 weeks ago against an AFC West team, and the Raiders struggle badly, regardless of what you want to say about the officiating and the Browns getting robbed or whatever. The Browns defense still didn't look very good, regardless of what the final score was, regardless of who won. Browns defense is just way too inconsistent right now. They've got talent, and they've showed at times, like this past Sunday, they can be really, really good, a top 10 unit. But then there's other times where they're a bottom half of the league type of team. So, you know what? I just think, again, going against the Chargers, who to this point, this will be the best offense they faced all year long. I think it's going to take 30 to keep up with Rivers and company if you're the Cleveland Browns offense. And Baker Mayfield, of course, has looked pretty good, but he's also turned over way too much. And again, he's a rookie. That's going to happen. But 12 points isn't going to do it against the Chargers, even in Cleveland. So I think it's going to take a lot of points. I'm not sure Cleveland can keep up. I'm not saying necessarily it's going to be a blowout. I think it's probably a pretty close game. But Chargers, that's a small line, 1.5, even my adjusted line. So the Chargers should win it. That's what I think. And the Bears on the road in Miami, they're favorite by 2.5. Trubisky, he was unbelievable. Threw 6 touchdown passes a couple weeks back. I don't know if he's going to replicate that by any means, but the Bears have number 7 offense in the NFL as far as scoring, number 2 scoring defense. Trubisky is getting a lot better. He's gaining a lot more confidence because he's got an innovative, offensive-minded head coach, and I think he's becoming more decisive. Regardless of how bad Tampa is, put that aside for a minute. He just threw with a lot more confidence in that Buccaneers game, because one of his big knocks, and one of the things that's really kind of held him back this year, is there was too many times, even in the Green Bay game, that they completely choked away, and a couple other games like the Seattle game that they did win. I think that was a Monday night game that was in Chicago a while back. But if you go back and you you watch the highlights, or if you watch the game live or you watch tape or whatever, there was just too many times where he was double and triple clutching on some of his throws, and he had opportunities at open receivers, and he waited too long, hesitated. He wasn't completely sure of himself. And other times where he kind of took off and kind of ran around and scrambled when he really shouldn't have, tried to extend the play and got sacked or something bad happened. And you didn't really see that at all against Tampa. He was unbelievable. Now, again, he's going to play a better defense in Miami, but Miami, middle of the road pass defense, middle of the road defense, so it's not like they're amazing. And the Dolphins, like I said, they're just fading badly. Tannehill's playing poorly, and remember, he's going up against a really great defense, so I wouldn't be shocked if he has a couple turnovers again. Not saying that two of his turnovers are going to lead to touchdowns like this past weekend against Cincinnati, but nonetheless, there could be a defensive touchdown there for the Bears, and I think the Bears will cover, and I think Trubisky will play well. It won't be 6 touchdowns, but could be 3. Could be a pretty good outing for him. And then the Seahawks and the Raiders, that's the London game. You know what? Oakland, they've been terrible defensively all year, but they've been really good offensively, which has kind of been how they've been the last couple years. And that's why I kind of said that I felt like, I think I wrote this in my Sunday write-up for my Sunday, I guess that would have been Sunday Late games. It just feels like it's more of the same where you get rid of Jack Del Rio, and I understood Stan getting rid of Jack Del Rio, but it feels like with Gruden, nothing's really changed. You still have a high-powered offense and absolutely no defense whatsoever, so it feels like it's kind of an extension of the Del Rio years, for better and for worse. But this past weekend was the first weekend that the Raiders offense all of a sudden couldn't score points. And they were going against the Chargers defense that was banged up, still without Joey Bosa, a defense that can be pretty good, but overall is average at best. And the Raiders only scored 10 points in that game. And, Derek Carr was okay, not great. Running game only had, I think, 41 yards. Marshawn Lynch, beast mode, had like 31. So, I kind of think that against Seattle, they're also going to have some struggles. Seattle's defense isn't elite like it used to be, but Seattle's defense is pretty decent, and they've had their moments this year. So I think they'll have some issues there against Seattle. I think they'll score a lot more points than they did last week. But Russell Wilson and company, they're really starting to come on. And I think it really amazes me about the Seahawks is there's very few times, even in the NFL, where you say a team loses and you're like, wow, I'm even more impressed by them after this week than I was before. And that's kind of how I looked at the Seahawks. At home, they lost a down-to-the-wire game against the Rams, who are arguably the best team in football, maybe the best offense in football, 5-0 now. They lost that game 33-31. The Rams were able to rally back late third quarter and into the fourth quarter, take the 2-point lead. And then, of course, they were able to run out the final, I think it was 3:28 of the game. And I keep saying over and over again, Sean McVay, I mean, he has some brass balls, man, because it was 4th and 1 from their own 42, and I can't remember if there was still like about a minute left on the clock, but even though everybody in the stadium expected a quarterback sneak, if you don't get that sneak or any other play you decide to run on 4th and 1, all of a sudden the Seahawks are on the edge of field goal range and are going to win that ball game. So that took a lot of courage, a lot of guts on McVay's part, and the irony of it is, as a diehard USC fan for most of my life, growing up watching the Pete Carroll years. Pete Carroll is, he's like the ultimate risk taker in the NFL. Maybe Ron Rivera, Riverboat Ron, is maybe riskier, but nonetheless, Pete Carroll loves to take those risks, and it's just funny. He's across the field on the other sideline, and he sees Sean McVay pull a move like this. I'm like, yeah, this is classic Pete Carroll. And of course, Jared Goff did convert the 4th and 1. He got 2 or 3 yards on the sneak. It still took a lot of courage, but you know what? I don't see the Raiders defense stopping this Rams offense at all. And I'm sorry, I was thinking of the Rams still. I don't see this Raiders defense stopping the Seahawks offense, I should say, because Russell Wilson, he's really starting to come on, and 3 touchdown passes this past weekend. Even though he had less than 200 yards, he did some really good things. And the biggest thing that really impresses me, one last thing about this game, is Seattle, they had all these horrible pass protection issues, like have lingered the last couple of years, issues running the football, which have lingered the last couple of years. And what have they done now for the last 3 weeks in a row? They've been excellent running the football. They've had a 100-yard rusher each of the last 3 weeks now. Chris Carson, who got banged up a couple weeks ago when he had his 100-yard game, missed out with the hip injury a couple weeks back, and It was a few weeks ago when he got the 100-yard game, and then 2 weeks back he missed out because he had a hip injury. But anyways, he comes back this past week against the Rams, rushes for like 116 yards. As a team, they had 190 rushing yards, which is extremely impressive. I know the Rams defense is falling apart a little bit right now, but still going against the Raiders defense, they should be able to run all over them. And you think about, Nick Chubb, a couple of those big touchdown runs he had for the Browns a couple weeks ago. I could certainly see somebody for Seattle doing that as well, maybe Chris Carson himself. So, yeah, I just think that Seattle will cover, and I just think the way Russell Wilson's playing right now, the way that running game's operating, defense is a little bit better than it's been. The offense line's doing a good job pass blocking, or at least a lot better than they were. So, yeah, I don't think the Raiders have a real great chance in this one. Both teams are traveling across the world to go to this friggin' game, so really not a travel disadvantage for either one. They're both at a disadvantage there, so nobody has an advantage. And then the Cardinals at the Vikings, like I said, that's the biggest line of the weekend. Vikings 9.5-point favorite. On paper, when you think about it, how well the Vikings played against the Eagles, it makes a lot of sense to go with the Vikings. But, I just think that, like that Buffalo game that they had a few weeks back, I think this underdog, lesser team is going to play them tough. I don't see the Cardinals winning the game, but I think Josh Rosen and company will give them a very, very tough game, and I think it'll be very, very close. Maybe Vikings by like 6 or 7, maybe a 30-23 type of game, which seems like a lot considering how bad the Cardinals' offense has been this year. But, I think Josh Rosen, he's got some upside. I wasn't in love with him by any means coming out of UCLA. He reminded me a lot of Jay Cutler, for better and for worse, but he can do some things. And even last week, where statistically he wasn't very good against the 49ers, still made that huge 75-yard touchdown pass to Christian Kirk. And those two could really have a great long-term relationship there. And then he was really, really good a couple weeks ago in the loss at home to the Seahawks, and his receivers dropped a whole bunch of passes, so that's why they ended up losing that game. But I think he'll do pretty well against the Vikings defense, believe it or not, even as a rookie. We saw Josh Allen, who I think is a lesser quarterback, do real well against them. I still can't really trust the Vikings defense. Cousins should do really, really well against the Cardinals defense. Cardinals defense isn't very good. Last week, the 49ers had the ball for over 40 minutes and almost gained 500 yards, but they had the 5 turnovers. Vikings certainly aren't going to do that, so that's why it could be a blowout. But I don't know, just for some reason I feel like, I can't explain it, but I feel like the Cardinals are going to find a way to keep it close for what it's worth. Like I said, I was 5-10 last week on my picks, so what the hell do I know? The Colts had the Jets. I as big of a believer as I am in Darnold, I just didn't really want to pick them last week because I felt like the Broncos would bounce back from the Monday night disappointment against the Chiefs and beat them. The Jets were 2.5-point favorite last week, 2.5-point favorite this week. Well, guess what? The Jets go out and they do. Darnold, 3 touchdown passes. Isaiah Crowell, franchise record, 219 yards. Defense made some plays as well, and they blow out the Broncos. Colts, the thing with them, and I said this in my write-up on the sugarhuddle.com, and again, please go to sugarhuddle.com, check out all my articles on a daily basis, try to get my website traffic up if you can. Their helmets, of course, as everybody knows, has the iconic blue horseshoe, and I said in my article that it would be more fitting, more apropos, if you will, if it was the Red Cross logo, because the Colts, in their Thursday night road game at Foxborough last week, they had, I think it ended up being 13 total players out. So they had more players out than players that they had to deactivate, because there's a rule, 53-man roster, you have to deactivate 7 on game day, so you can only dress 46. They had like 13 out, and then 3 of their defensive starters go down during the course of the game, and then 2 or 3 others got banged up on both sides of the ball. So everybody's just getting hurt. They're all dropping like flies in Indy. I don't know what the hell's going on with their training staff, but everybody's getting hurt. And they still had a very, very valiant effort against the Patriots. I mean, they could have laid down that game, down 24-3, again, in Foxborough at halftime. And they came back, made it 24-17, and then they kind of wore down the stretch. Defense just couldn't keep up. And then, of course, offense made some silly turnovers, some receivers kind of screwing some things up. But you know what? Middle-of-the-road defense, it's banged up. An offense that still can't run the football, hit or miss as far as pass protection. I know they've got luck, but I like Darnold and the Jets in this one. They're not going to blow them out the way that they did against the Broncos, but I could see the Jets definitely covering the 2.5 point spread, which means they'd win the game, of course. So I think this will be a very, very close game, and another game decided by 3 to 7 points. But yeah, I like the Jets in this one, and I think Darnold has a chance at another 3 touchdown pass game in this one going against the Colts secondary, which is inferior to the Broncos. So we'll see on that one. And then the Panthers at the Redskins. The Redskins, I mentioned this in my Monday Night Football recap, the video and the article. Booger McFarland from Monday Night Football, he mentioned that, the Redskins, a lot of their mistakes that they made the first half against the Saints were very correctable things, just kind of dumb, silly mistakes that are easily fixable. But the other thing that he mentioned is the Saints offense isn't a very good matchup for them because they want to go against physical run-based type teams, and they're getting that these next few weeks. They've got this week, they got Carolina, and then they've got Dallas, that's also in Washington, and then finally they're at the Giants. None of those offenses are particularly that good, and so the Redskins, who actually came into last night's game against the Saints, Monday night's game against the Saints, as the number one scoring defense, number one total defense, number one pass defense. Obviously, those rankings have since dropped. But that wasn't a good matchup for them going against the Saints, and now they're going against 3 not-so-good offenses whatsoever. It starts with Carolina. Carolina, of course, almost gave it away against the Giants, had the 63-yard walk-off from Graham Gano. But you know what? I think the Redskins will do enough defensively to kind of hold Carolina in check. Carolina's been consistent as far as being kind of just a mediocre offense. And then on the other side of the ball, I think Alex Smith will bounce back. Not going to light it up by any means, but he's going against a very mediocre Panthers secondary, and so I think he'll do a decent job. I think Adrian Peterson in the running game, it's a very, very tough matchup because they're going against a very good Panthers run defense, but I think they'll find a way to bounce back and get some yardage there and kind of throw the Panthers a little bit off guard. So I think the Redskins will find a way to get it done there. And then the final Sunday early game, again, the Bills at the Texans. I just felt that's a way too big of a line. The Bills, you don't know what to expect. Josh Allen had 82 passing yards on 19 attempts and an interception, and he led a game-winning drive against the Titans, and they won 13-12 at home. So you're not going to get a whole hell of a lot out of the Bills' offense. But the Bills' defense, they can keep them in games, and we've seen with the Texans, 4 times in the red zone against Cowboys, and I think only one of them resulted in a touchdown. I think 1 or 2 others resulted in field goals. There was a turnover on downs there. So they can't do that against Buffalo, not as much because it's Buffalo, but just the fact that Houston can't do that every single week and keep expecting to win. They got to get their act together there a little bit. But I think Deshaun Watson and DeAndre Hopkins that will have yet another really, really strong game. And, of course, Hopkins had that Madden video game, like double, triple spin type of deal there in overtime to set up the game-winning field goal. But, yeah, I think Texans will do enough to find a way to win the game, and maybe it'll be by 7. But, again, 8.5-point spread, I just think that's a little too high. And I think Buffalo is actually going to stay pretty competitive and also keep the score fairly down. So it could be one of those ones where Texans only score 20 or 21 points, enough to win but not enough to cover. And then the late games, I picked the road team in all 3 matchups. The road teams are favored. Again, the Rams minus 6.5 at the Broncos. I just think the Rams, best team in football. Eventually, they probably will lose a couple times, but I don't see it being against the Broncos. I know that's a really, really hostile environment playing at Denver, and Kansas City experienced that on Monday Night Football a little over a week ago, but I still think the Rams are going to find a way to win because I think Case Keenum, he had 377 yards and a couple touchdowns, but he had a turnover, got sacked a few times, and just didn't make enough plays when he needed to. So until the passing game makes enough plays to keep up with a high-powered offense like this, and if the running game can get back to 150 yards a game like they did the first few weeks, they'll have a chance, and especially the Rams, you figure. Remember, both Cooper Kupp and Brandon Cooks got knocked out of the Seahawks game with concussions, and so that could really hurt them a little bit as well. But at the end of the day, I just think the Rams are going to find a way to win this by double digits. I just, seeing all the terrible coaching decisions that Vance Joseph has made the last couple of games, and seeing how limited, as we already knew, that Case Keenum is, I just think the Rams should be able to win this by about 10 or 14 points. Jaguars at the Cowboys. This is an interesting one because Cowboys' offense is terrible and Dak's mediocre per usual. Ezekiel Elliott's playing through injuries right now. The running game did nothing against Houston. But at the same time, you don't know what Blake Bortles you're going to get. Even Jacksonville players don't know what Blake Bortles are going to get on a given week. But you know what? With the Cowboys, they're still not the same defense without Sean Lee, as we know. Their secondary isn't that great, as we all already know as well. So I think even with all the Jaguars injuries and all the banged up running backs, they had to sign ancient Jamal Charles just yesterday. That's how desperate they are. But with all that being said, I think the Jaguars find a way to cover and find a way to win the game. Dallas is undefeated at home, but the two teams they beat weren't really all that. So beat the Giants, and I'm trying to think of who else they beat. Whoever it wasn't as good as the Jaguars. But I think the Jaguars, they bounce back. They get a couple takeaways from Dak. And I think Bortles goes back to being the good Bortles that we saw a couple weeks ago against Jets, where he throws a few touchdown passes and looks pretty darn good. So it's going to be a Bortles coaster week in and week out, but I think this will be a week where the Bortles coaster extends up the tracks instead of down the tracks, and I think the Jaguars find a way to win that. And then finally, the Ravens -2.5 at the Titans. I was really disappointed in how Mariota and the Titans played against the Bills. They looked so good against the Eagles, and seeing how poor they were against the Bills was really, really disappointing. And so I really don't know what to really expect out of Mariota going against the Ravens defense, because even with the Ravens losing to the Browns, I mean, they did intercept Baker Mayfield early on. They did sack him 5 times, and he came on in overtime, but it wasn't like he was tearing him up in regulation. Again, 12-9 game. And then the Titans, they only gave up, I think it was like 223 total yards to the Bills. And again, Josh Allen, 10 of 19, 82 yards and interception. And yet Allen leads the game-winning field goal drive to beat the Titans 13-12. Titans offense pitiful all day long, kind of reverting back to their pre-Philadelphia game form. So I just can't really trust them against the Ravens, even though it's in Nashville. And so I think the Ravens are going to be ticked off in a lot of ways, losing to the Browns, losing a division game, losing another division game. Flacco playing poorly. I think they're going to bounce back, and I think they'll look real good against Titans. And I wouldn't be shocked if they blow out the Titans, to be honest with you. The Sunday night game, the Chiefs at the Patriots. The Patriots 3.5-point favorite at home. A lot of ways this kind of sets up as a classic favorable game, win for the Patriots, whatever you want to call it, because you got to think about it. They're at home, primetime game. It's supposed to be a statement game for the opposing team. So, of course, the Patriots are going to want to really show up and give them hell and beat them. Brady's going to want to show up and play at a high level and kind of stick it to this undefeated Chiefs team and knock them down a peg. And the opposing quarterback, which, of course, is Pat Mahomes, has been trending downward a little bit the last couple weeks. Didn't play particularly great until the fourth quarter against the Broncos, and then against the Jaguars. Didn't throw a touchdown pass, had a couple of interceptions, but he did make a lot of important throws. So overall, it was a pretty decent effort by him. But nonetheless, the last couple of weeks, he's been figured out a little bit. So in a lot of ways, you look at it and say, yeah, the Patriots should find a way to win this. But at the same time, the Patriots, they've had some trouble with the Chiefs. Of course, the season opening game last year at home against the Chiefs, the Chiefs clobbered them, and the Chiefs have been able to beat them a couple times in recent years. So I think the Chiefs take them down again, because remember, that was with Alex Smith. Now you got Pat Mahomes, and the Patriots haven't really seen anything like him. And as we all know, the Patriots defense isn't very good. And I don't think the Chiefs are going to commit some of the silly turnovers that the Colts did. And then the thing that really impressed me about the Chiefs' win was that their defense has been so bad this year, and they look so good against Jaguars. Blake Bortles had a total of 5 turnovers, including 4 interceptions. So I was really impressed by what the Chiefs' defense did. And even dating back to the Denver game, even though the Denver offense isn't a juggernaut by any means, the way the Chiefs were able to step up in the second half of that game, especially the fourth quarter, and shut down the Broncos was really impressive. So the Chiefs' defense is starting to come on again. They've been one of the best defenses in football in recent years, and they fell apart last year. And then, of course, because of their terrible secondary this year, they were supposed to be really bad this year. They've been mostly really bad, but I think they've really looked good the last couple games. And I think they do a pretty decent job against Brady and the Patriots. They're not going to do what Detroit did against Brady, but I do think that they will play real well against Brady, and well enough that the Chiefs offense will be able to score its points and be able to win the football game. So obviously not only the Chiefs win the game, but that would mean they, of course, would cover the spread. And then finally, the Monday night game, again, it's 49ers at the Packers. Packers 7.5-point favorite. The 49ers, if I told you they had the ball for over 40 minutes last week against a winless team, they had 447 total yards of offense, and they lose by 10 points on their own home field, you'd tell me I'm crazy, but that's exactly what happened. That's because San Francisco had 5 turnovers, 4 of them from backup quarterback C.J. Beathard, who, of course, is now the starter with Jimmy G out for the year. So C.J. Beathard, last couple weeks, he's put his team in position to win. They had a chance to upset the Chargers in L.A., they had a chance to beat the Cardinals at home, and both times just really, really bad, costly turnovers in the second half, and all of a sudden they lose both of those games. So they do have a puncher's chance at Green Bay, but again, prime time, Monday night, at Lambeau, under the lights, there's, a little bit of a rift there internally with Green Bay because of how things went down in the Detroit game. But you know what? Mason Crosby, he's lucky to still have a job. Missed 5 kicks last week, including the 4 field goals at Detroit indoors, by the way. And I think if he's called upon, I think he's going to show up this time around and play pretty well, or else he will officially get cut. But I think kicker or no kicker, I think Aaron Rodgers will come out and play really well. He didn't do anything in the first half against Detroit, and then in garbage time, big comeback, ended up with 442 yards and 3 touchdowns because they were playing from behind. I think this will be his best game that he's had in a while. I think Rodgers will play really, really well against the 49ers. And I think the Niners, mediocre defense, mediocre secondary, 2 turnover prone on offense. I think the Packers are going to blow them out. So Packers 7.5-point favorite. And I think even if the Packers were like a 10.5-point favorite, I would have taken Green Bay. So I think Green Bay is going to win this pretty easily. And unfortunately for ESPN, this will be 2 terrible Monday night games in a row. Of course, we thought the Saints would be a better game, but it wasn't. It was a blowout. And I think this is a really bad game that's going to be a blowout too. So this might be one that, a lot of people tune out after like the third quarter. We'll see. But anyways, those are my Week 6 NFL betting lines and picks. And again, let's hope for a better week where I actually have a winning record against the spread, because now I'm under 500 because of my 5-10 week. I'm now 37-41 overall for the season, so I'm under 500 for the first time all year long, and so now I need a big week to bounce back. We'll see. But anyways, please go to sugarhuddle.com. Of course, I have articles every day. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel. And again, I'll keep posting these betting lines and picks articles every single week. So thank you.